Hello, everybody out there in Panther Country. This is Superintendent Tim Widiker coming to you with Panther Vodcast number 10. And I want to also remind folks, if you want to get notifications as new vodcasts come out, make sure you subscribe, which you can do there right in YouTube. Also want to do a disclaimer before we get started. We've got construction going on right now at the district office, so you might hear some loud noises and banging and things like that, but we're going to continue on. Just want to let you know ahead of time before we get started. So Panther Vodcast number 10, and my guest today is Director of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Glenn Webb. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you, Tim. It's good to be here today for this vodcast. I'm excited. Never done this before.
All right. First time for everything. So, and you can't say that anymore. So let's get started with telling us a little bit about your background.
All right. I'm going to focus mainly on my education. I got a bachelor's and master's degree from UW River Falls in ag education. That's what spurred my teaching career, where I started and taught 2 years in Cadott and then taught 5 years once I moved to St. Croix Central in ag ed. From there, I started in on my ed specialist degree and superintendent licensure. That allowed, timing-wise, just perfect for me to get the principal job here at St. Croix Central, where I spent the last 12 years before starting the Director of Teaching and Learning position this year. During my time as principal, I also earned my doctorate degree from Edgewood College in educational leadership and did a dissertation around Marzano's 26 leadership responsibilities for principals. So that's kind of my education background and where I guess those things that helped me get to where I am today.
All right. Tell us a little bit about your family, Glenn.
I'm fortunate enough to have a beautiful wife of 13 years. Together we've had 3 lovely daughters, Lily, who is 11, Haley is 9, and Polly is 6. We actually live near Elmwood, where I grew up on our family farm. My brother and I still work together with Mom on the family farm, operating that. And my wife's a teacher in Elmwood. She teaches middle school ELA and reading, and that's where our girls currently attend school. So very, very fortunate to have the family I have.
What about, as most folks probably know in the community, you were the high school principal for, I believe, 12 years, and recently have transitioned into a new role as Director of Teaching and Learning. Can you maybe explain to folks what the Director of Teaching and Learning does, i.e., what is your job description?
All right, with this position, again, it's ever changing, as is education, but there's kind of 9 major areas that I focus on with the new role. One being curriculum review and aligning all the standards with the curriculum. Also, I'm in charge of kind of managing all the resources for instruction that we use in the district, currently going through right now, reviewing some of those things we have and comparing to new technologies and different things that are out there. I'm kind of in charge of all the staff professional development, which also includes overseeing our professional learning communities district-wide, where teachers meet on a weekly basis to talk about students and data and how we can continue to continue improvement. Another major area is being the district assessment coordinator, in charge of all the different testing required by the state and federal level. I also am in charge of the Effectiveness Project, which is the piece we use for teacher evaluation and growth. So I lead that and kind of a coach. They call a effectiveness coach for that piece. Other things, I lead the district mentoring program. I'm also kind of carried on one role from my principal role as the virtual charter school principal. So I spent some time working with that. And then it's just basically other duties as needed or assigned by Mr. Widiker or anybody else in the district that has something that they would like me to help with. So, a lot of different hats to wear, but a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, when we're done here, I was going to talk to you about helping with construction. They need to tear down a few walls.
No problem. I can do that.
All right. So why the switch from principal to Director of Teaching and Learning?
All right, I've been asked that question a lot of times, and I guess I've been pretty consistent in my answers. So I wrote down as I was thinking about this, kind of four major things. I had 12 what I felt were great years as a principal. We accomplished a lot of things. We had some great times. We had some really tough times, but it was really a good 12 years. But I was at a point where I was kind of ready to make a change one way or the other. So that was one main reason. The second main reason is I wanted to make a change, but I didn't want to leave St. Croix Central. I've been here for 18 years now. I love the place. I've seen a lot of things happen since I've been here, and wasn't a family I was ready to leave. But this allowed me to stay here, take on a little different focus, where kind of a third thing, I'm able to impact students and staff on the district level. And then I mentioned the St. Croix Central family, which is very important to me, but also the job change allowed me to do more for my family and spend more time with my girls who are getting into more and more activities and such, things that were difficult to do and get away from when I was the high school principal. So those are kind of the four main reasons I made the switch, and so far it seems to be going well.
Yeah, and I would agree. It has, and I certainly agree with your reasons for wanting to make the change. Totally, we always talk about family and making sure that all our employees have a good balance between their personal lives and their families and their work. And I certainly support that, and I'm glad to see that has worked out. And I know so far you've got to spend more time with your kids and with your wife, Amanda. So that is obviously a great thing.
Yeah, and that's another thing I really appreciate about this district is they have that focus in mind, and I think that's probably why I'm still here as well.
Yeah, good point. So the bulk of our conversation today, I was hoping to be about our school accountability report cards. And they started, I believe this is year number 4. Is that correct, Glenn, with school report cards?
Yep, they started were created in actually 2011-12 as part of the state accountability piece that they had to develop to satisfy the waiver for No Child Left Behind at the federal level. So we actually have 4 school report cards and 3 district report cards at this time.
Yeah, and it's a good point to make, although they really started 5 years ago, but there was 1 year last year where we didn't get an accountability report card because they changed the standardized test and they thought it was so different they didn't really want to compare. They didn't feel it was a good comparison of apples to apples. So there was the 11-12 report card, the 12-13, and then there was a year off, I believe.
Yep.
Was it?
Yep, 13-14, and then 14-15 was off, and then came back with the 15.
That's it. Yep. And then there was the very first year in 11-12, there was no district report card. It was just the school report cards. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then we got a new report card this year because our virtual charter school, although we don't have enough students being tested to meet their benchmark, so we don't get an actual score yet for that. It's just called like an accountability rating, right?
And just an alternate rating system. We actually have to provide the state information on how the students are doing, and then that counts for our accountability instead of having a report card. You have to have at least 50 students to have a report card, and if majority of those or 50% of those are open enrollment students, then you still will not get an accountability report card. It would stay an alternate rating, and we actually fit into both of those categories currently. We're under 50. I think we have 39 kids in the charter school right now in year 3, and then all of those students in the charter currently are open enrolled from other districts.
So would you like to give an overview of the report cards before I pull them up on the screen and share them, or should I pull one up and explain it with a visual? What would you prefer?
You can pull it up, so as I kind of talk through the background and such, they're able to see some of the components of the report card.
Okay. All right. I will do that. I'll pull up the district one.
Perfect.
All right. Can you see that on your screen?
Yeah. So as you kind of look at the report card, there are different components. You get an overall accountability score, which you'll see in the top left of the report card. As the district, we're at a 76.3, which exceeds expectations. You can see the different levels there that are measured. Before I talk specifically about those, I'll talk about the 4 main priority areas, which are on the kind of center to the right side on top. We have student achievement that really looks at state reading and math tests, the student growth, which takes into account improvement over time on reading and math in the district. Closing gaps is the 3rd priority area, where we look at the progress of students in certain subgroups. And then the last one is on-track post-secondary readiness, which looks at the performance things that make kids college and career ready, and ready to go into graduation, depending on which age level they're at. So those are the 4 main priority areas within the report card that all tie into the overall accountability score. Now, you can't take those 4 areas, add them up, and average them out. That's not how the score is actually arrived at. Some people get a little confused on that. Those are all separate ratings that go together to make the exceeds expectation score, for instance, for our district. But overall, there's a bunch of different calculations that go together to make that happen. So those are kind of the main areas they look at, and then they rate you into 5 different areas. As you can see there in the bottom, fails to meet, meets few expectations, meets expectations, exceeds, and significantly exceeds. So as a district, we're in that second to the top tier of exceeding expectations, which is to sit, but overall an area that we definitely want to continue to improve as a district as a whole. The other thing to note, we'll talk about each individual school report card. The ratings, again, for those report cards aren't just added together and averaged out to get the district report. The district report card is based off of all of the students in the district being combined together in their data. So our 1,500 and some kids are all put together for the district report card, where they're all separated out for each of the schools. So that's just something to note when you're looking at that. The other thing is with the district report card, they compare our district against the other districts in the state compared to schools being compared to other schools in the state. So you may notice that our overall district report card is lower than our other building report cards, and that doesn't seem necessarily right when you look at it at first glance. But if you get a little more background into it, you find out that, for instance, our district is compared to 425 districts in the state, compared to one of our schools would be compared to all the other schools, which there's about 1,950 for all different schools. So it's not one middle school and 425 middle schools. There may be 600 middle schools. So that changes how they rate those in accordance to the different buildings or districts. So that's why that can end up different and potentially lower than our actual school report cards. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Take it for what it's worth. If you really love math, you can go online, search the DPI website. All you got to do is actually Google Wisconsin State Report Cards. It pulls up the information, and you can look at any district in the state of Wisconsin just by doing a simple search and look at a detailed report that gives you 15 pages of information. We're not going to take time to look at that much here today. We're going to give a general overview.
And you mentioned, in addition to the 4 priority areas that go into the score, there also is, in this you'll notice that a deduction, there can be a deduction for student engagement indicators, or I guess more accurately, student disengagement indicators. So the good news is we don't have any deductions. What we could be getting deductions for is test participation rate, and we want 95% or greater of our students to be participating in the test, so we meet that criteria. Absenteeism rate also could be a deduction, and we got to have less than 13% of our students absent or for an absenteeism rate. Then lastly, a dropout rate. We need at least 94% of our students to graduate, or less than 6% is another way of looking at it, drop out. So that's great news that we have no deductions. I believe each category is a 5-point deduction. Is that correct, Glenn?
Yes, and actually within the state, they discounted a couple of these things, like the absentee rate and test participation. Actually, the test participation rate they took off this year because of some of the changes in testing. There were some districts that had a lot of kids opting out. I'm happy and proud to say that our district wasn't one of those. We would have qualified well above the 95% participation rate, and that's a good thing because the state tests allow us to really gauge how we're doing in our district and then comparing us to others. There have been some other schools that have had some issues there, and that's why they took it out of the accountability this year, but it will probably be added back in the future.
Okay. So just to explain, if we, for instance, if we had a dropout rate that was greater than 6%, it would be a 5-point deduction, and that comes right off the overall score, correct? So if we had a 5-point deduction, our score would have been a 71.3.
Correct.
Instead of a 76.3? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Some folks may be asking the question, well, do all students take this test? Does every student in the district take the test? They don't necessarily take this test, correct? There are students that have IEPs where this test would not be appropriate, correct?
Yeah, we do have a few kids, and just to clarify, there's a couple of different tests involved. Actually, on this report card, there are 3 different state-level tests up through 8th grade. We would have still had the Wisconsin Concepts and Knowledge exam, better known as the WKCE. That's one piece that would have been included. We had the Wisconsin Badger test 2 years ago that would be in this data, and then last year the Wisconsin Forward exam. So over the last 3 years, we have changed data test types 3 times, but they have combined all of that data together into this report card. So that's what it looks like in grades 3 through 8. And then also 10th grade would have taken the WKC social studies test last year. That won't be taken any longer. To my knowledge, all the high school testing will be through the ACT suite. So freshmen and sophomores take the Aspire test through ACT, and the juniors all take the ACT itself, just like any other student across the nation that wants to go to college. So those are the main tests, but then there's another one called a DLM, or a Dynamic Learning Map. That is a test that students that have certain disabilities, cognitively and physically, that aren't able to take the forward exam, they are given the DLM, or the Dynamic Learning Map. And we're actually in the process of figuring out what that's going to look like in the district this year, because the federal level just made a change saying you can only have 1% of the state of Wisconsin can take the DLM test. So Wisconsin has passed that on to districts to say you can only have 1% of your student body take the DLM. So we have to look at that and see if we're going to fall into that category, or if we have to ask for a waiver from the state if that number is higher. One of the things that kind of comes into play, we have an agreement with Baldwin Woodville where we work with some of their students in our severe disability area. They just changed the name on it. It used to be CDS. I can't come up with the new name right now, but that raises our numbers in the district. So we have to have that conversation to figure out, okay, does that affect us, or do we get to count Baldwin into our numbers as far as kids that get DLM? Those are the distinctions between those tests.
So there's a lot of information, obviously, on this report card. What you were just talking about, they kind of explain in very small print here under Wisconsin Student Assessment System % Proficient Advanced, and it says forward exam, grades 3 through 8, ACT, grade 11, Dynamic Learning Maps, grade 3 through 8 and 11. So again, yeah, the state made the change. Instead of WKCE in 10th grade, they now have all juniors, all 11th graders take the ACT. So every junior takes that test every year. Obviously, it can serve a dual purpose for college entrance and for a state assessment system. So there's a lot of information on here. The bottom left is our district information that shows our demographics. And then this chart here talks about the percentage of our students that are proficient and advanced. Now, another thing worth noting is, so when we start to look at, when we'll get to that next, our elementary, middle, and high school report cards separately. So again, the elementary is based on 2 grade levels that take the state test, 3rd and 4th grade. The middle school is based on 4 grade levels that take the test in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And the high school is based on 1 grade level taking the test, grade 11. So it's a little different for each school, the number of students taking the test. Obviously, the most tested or completely tested school is the middle school. So again, there's tons of subtle differences like that throughout this whole report card, but I think the Department of Public Instruction has done a nice job to make these as accurate and take into everything into account. And they call that, well, part of that is value added when they are kind of trying to compare apples to apples. But even like you said, one of those discrepancies was districts is compared to 430 some districts in the state, whereas a middle school isn't compared to all the middle schools in the state. It's compared to every school period, and vice versa for high school and elementary. So there's a lot of subtle differences. Like you said, we could really go into the weeds. I think we'll try and stay at a little higher level. Anything else you wanted to mention before maybe we moved on and looked at the individual report cards, Glenn?
Now, really, the main thing also to understand is this isn't just a 1-year glimpse. It's averaged over 3 years for most of the data, and some of the data actually a 5-year trend. So you get a good feel for what your district is doing trend-wise, not just year by year. Present what our last few years look like, not just last year. So that's important.
Correct. Yeah, especially with growth. Obviously, in order to measure growth, they got to compare that over time, for instance.
Yes. And at the high school, we talk about right now, it's just the 1 grade level, the juniors. They're still deciding if they're going to add in the growth piece at the high school next year or upcoming years to include the Aspire data. But they're not to that point yet where we can, because we haven't been taking Aspire long enough. But that is a conversation the state is having, if they're going to add that in and have a growth score at the high school as well, using Aspire compared to ACT.
All right, where would you like to start, elementary or high school?
Elementary would be fine.
All right, there we go.
All right, so just looking at the score overall, again, the report card looks very similar to the district, basically all the same information. But if you look, overall score of 77.6, that is actually an improvement from the report card 2 years ago of 10 points. 2 years ago, they were at a 67.6. So there's been some things that have really turned around elementary-wise that have got us back into that area kind of where we want to be. Again, we're far from happy with that. Some people will say a 77.6, that's kind of like a C. It's not necessarily rated that way, but that's kind of the way we discuss it, that we have a lot of room to get better. We're not at 100% with all of our kids in achievement, so we have plenty of room to grow. But I got to give credit to all the elementary staff. To be able to have a turnaround at 10 points over 2 years' time is awesome. So that's really good. And you can break down each of the achievement scores and growth scores. We're not going to get real deep into that again today. But what's kind of interesting is our overall achievement is really strong for the most part. But our growth, we have some extra work to do, I would say, for example, in math, to show growth in all of our students over time. So we need to continue to work on that. And those are things we're looking at right now as far as how we continue to enhance our math instruction and fill in those gaps and really get the students growing at a better rate there.
So you're saying we have some growth in the area of growth? Some
Yes.
growth opportunities?
That would be correct. We have some gaps in the gaps area and some growth needed in the growth area. Our achievement overall is okay, but definitely room for improvement as well. So that's, again, what I love about what we have going on at St. Croix Central. No matter what level it is, we are looking at it from the standpoint of, hey, we're in an okay place, but we want to be better. We want to drive to be that district recognized by others as a great district, and we continue to work on that every day.
All right, middle school.
Right, middle school. I talk about them as just our long and steady group. They've been very consistent, growing a little bit every year in every report card we've had. They started out at a 74.5 when the first report card came out 5 years ago. They grew not quite a half a point the next year. Following year, they went up about 1.5 points. Then, of course, we had that break in 14-15 where there wasn't a report card. This year, when they came out, 76.4, up again from 76.2. So they've just had that steady climb, continuing to improve and make things better. And again, as you said, Mr. Widiker, that is the group actually that does the most testing. It's really a challenge to keep kids motivated because they do test a lot on every grade level. But again, I think it's kudos to all the staff at the middle school to say, through everything they're doing and all the tests and all the changes, they can and continual improvement every year. Again, that's not to say we don't have room for growth, because like we talked about last time, but there's been steady improvement, and I think we'll continue to add to that every year as we figure out what these tests look like and how we can make things better for kids as far as their learning and growth.
All right, and then elementary, whoops, I'm sorry, high school?
Yeah, we'll finish with the high school because we already kind of mentioned the alternate rating with the virtual school. It's going to be the same report card, but it's just going to have a big AR on it, and it's not going to have any other data that would be different than what we've seen in the other 3 report cards on the building level or district level. So we'll skip that, finish with the high school one. And you can see the overall score, 84.4, significantly exceeding expectations. The high school, again, has continued to grow. We started out at the high school at a 74.1 on the first report card back in 11 and 12, went to a 76.3, 83.5 to an 84.4. So again, really proud of the students and staff there that are able to continue to make those strides, even though there's been some changes and stuff. I do have to mention with that, and I think, Tim, you mentioned that there's only a couple of areas that are being measured. And like on our closing the gaps, the only thing we're rated on is graduation rate, because we don't have enough students in the subgroups that they look at that gap piece with to rate them. So all of the rating for the gap area for our report card went into the graduation rate instead of being broken out into 3 areas. That's definitely a benefit to us because our graduation rate is very high at St. Croix Central, so that helped us out significantly. But we got 100 points in that area versus what other school districts that have the larger subgroups would have only got 50, and then they would have also had a math gap and a language gap score similar to what our middle school and elementaries would have had. So that is one kind of difference in where the high school is right now.
So obviously the big picture, all 4 report cards are either in the exceeds or significantly exceeds expectations range. So we're 4 or 5 stars in the rating, which is definitely cause to celebrate. We recognize the great work we're doing where the scores are high, but then we also look at our lowest scores, as always, and look at those as opportunities for growth. And one pattern we recognized right away was our lowest score kind of across the district. A theme was in mathematics, either achievement or growth. So that's something that we certainly have made a priority for growth. starting right away and into the extended future. But we got a lot of work to do there. Like I said, we're always looking to improve and obviously improve these scores. We feel they're a good measure because they're so comprehensive. And again, we celebrate it. We put it right out there with being transparent and put them on banners and put them up in our commons in our schools.
Yeah. That again is something that I really credit the district for is we make the academic side of things just as important as other pieces too. I still remember a couple of years ago when we first got the high school score at 83.2 or whatever, or 83.5. I remember doing a fist pump in the air about that score and really being excited. Similar to this year when the scores came out, they actually came out the day of the state football championship, and I said, "Hey, come on, folks, let's think about getting buses together and celebrating this report card." But everybody wanted to head to Madison instead. So I understand that, but we do make both academics and athletics a focus here, which is another thing that I think is just awesome. So on the banner, the number of compliments I've had over the years of people walking into the different buildings and saying, "Wow, that's awesome! You have your state report cards hanging in your commons, making it a priority." I mean, it's endless the number of comments I've had about that. So a lot of other schools saying, "Where'd you come up with that idea? How did you do that?" So I've shared that with others. We've shared that with others. And I think that's a trend that you're going to see in other districts as well.
So folks have questions about the report card. How do they contact you, Glenn?
I think the best way would be contact Mr. Widiker. He's kind of the resident expert. Oh, no. I think you can contact any of the leadership in the district, but myself, probably the best way to contact me, because I do bop between 4 different offices now, between the district, elementary, middle school, and high school. I actually have 5 offices because I spend a lot of time in Turtle Lake at CISA as well at meetings, so I can bring stuff back. But the best way is to send me an email and ask any questions that you may have. But also encourage you, again, if you want things specifically about our report cards or any other districts, go on the DPI website and again, just throw in a Google search for Wisconsin State Report Cards. It'll bring up all that information.
They have a ton of information. Yeah, a ton of information for consumption there. So anybody, again, interested in that, I would start there. They're the ones most intimate with the whole school report cards and accountability. So any final thoughts as we close here, Glenn?
I think the biggest thing is, we feel we're in a good place, but we're striving to get better every day. And I know I've said it already in this vodcast, but that's what I absolutely love about St. Croix Central, the community, the staff, the kids. You talk about getting better, and everybody says, "What can we do?" So it's a team effort, it's a community effort. As I kind of talked about at the get-go, a family effort in this, and I just think if we all keep working hard together, we'll continue to do great things at St. Croix Central, and it's being noticed by others out there. We talk to people across the state that are saying, "Wow, what's going on at St. Croix Central? You guys passed a huge referendum, you got great report cards, your girls cross country team just went to state, your football team just won a state title. You guys got some awesome things going on." All I can close with is say, we want to continue to get more awesome. Hey, you want to help contribute to that? Any community members that have ideas, contact any of us and just keep the good things going. Thanks.
All right, and thank you, Glenn. As we close here, again, thanks for sharing the information and a little bit more about yourself, so folks could know a little bit more about your new role. So, thank you, and thanks to everybody out there. Have a great rest of your week.